there he is there. All right. Mr. Radishi, you want to talk to us about the proposed zoning change?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
We had a request to rezone the property from C2 to C3. The site is at the corner of High Street and East Street. It is approximately 0.422 of an acre. Currently it's zone C2. The property to the north is zone C3, which is what they want to rezone to. South is multifamily. To the east is industrial and marine rec. This property is directly across in that industrial zone. And to the west is multifamily. The property is currently vacant. To the north is a retail strip center. To the south is townhouses and single family. Senior center and club property, the VFW owns property across the street. And to the west is single family houses. Currently there's a public hearing set for this property for the general public to make their comments on it. I believe that the owner of the property stated that originally this property had a gas station on it. I think the last time the gas station was there was like 1987, and there was a tackle shop for many years, and the building was taken down. When we did the changes to the zoning use table, all the gas stations and automobile uses were placed into the B3 district. So that includes gas stations and instant oil changes, enterprise car rental, car washes, and etc. Currently, the C2 does allow for offices and general retail and some other general uses. Is there any questions on the property?
Any idea what the owner wants to put there?
I believe he did call me and ask to put a gas station onto the property, and I informed him that in a C2 you could not do that. His options was to rezone to B3 to be allowed to put a gas station onto the property.
Okay. I don't think
Not a conditional use, right?
No, it is a permitted, it's a permitted use. But it would have to follow, any new uses has to follow the current site design standards and have to do a site plan. So it would have to do landscaping, and it would have to, similar to what the Dollar General went through with the site plan, and make sure that it meets our design standards. This building will also have to go through.
Okay.
What I was gonna say, you know, I believe, talking to Rayco, son of, people that own HTP,
Mhm.
they've dealt with gas stations for years. And my take on it would be, if he really wants to get this rezoned before he sells it, because they get too close to the business. But I just wanna bring that up.
Thank you. We need to get you a microphone. Sorry, folks.
I was just about having that moment. What's going on? Sorry, try that again.
You want to repeat that? The audience couldn't hear you.
Yeah, I was just gonna say,
Yeah, it should be.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say that, talking to Barry this spring or summer, he's planning on selling it to Rayco. Rayco, father died, and all their they own HTP, and all their businesses through gas stations throughout Cleveland and all around here. So I believe, I know some of the people in the audience, a couple of them called me, what would be landscaped, and what's it gonna look like? And I just said we'd have to go through plans and everything else, but I believe that's why Barry's getting out of the business completely. His son's going to medical school.
Okay,
in
gotcha.
India.
So then I'll try to just summarize what Mr. Saracey was saying. Mr. Saracey was speaking that the folks that own HTP, the Graco family, they're into the gas station business. Barry is looking to sell the property, and that's probably why he wants to rezone this as a gas station. Whether there's a handshake agreement or anything with Graco and Barry, I don't know, but that would be, and I know Vern, what was it, five years ago or so? I think there was conversation of a gas station at the same corner, but nothing ever came of it. So, I mean, it sounds like that's the gist of it. He just wants to go from a C2 to a C3 zoning to allow the permitted uses in a C3 then. Correct, Dave?
Correct.
Okay,
And the property to the north, the strip center is also C3.
gotcha, right.
David, as far as the procedure goes, doesn't this normally go to planning commission prior to a public hearing?
Normally, yes. We did not call a planning commission meeting for this. This will need to be submitted to planning commission before an ordinance can be considered by the council. But the recommendation of the planning commission will be together for the council before we do an ordinance.
Thank you.
Mayor, quick question, and I don't know if this is working or not. It's working? Okay. So it was a Sohio gas station for years and years and years, as long as I can remember, and it was operating under a different zoning then? Do you know?
Prior to December of 2020, gas stations were allowed under a C2.
Okay,
When we revised the permitted use table, we moved all the gas stations to C3 district because most of downtown is a C2.
mhm,
And so there was a decision, my recommendation to the council was to put all the automotive uses into a C3 district.
mhm.
And so when that happened, this property was no longer allowed to have a gas station on it as a C2. That's why they're asking for the rezoning to C3.
And so how many years did it live as a gas station? Do we know that, or the actual? amount?
I don't know how many years, looking at the tax maps, the old tax maps, it was owned by Sohio from the late 50s until 1987. Then it switched to ownership to So Bait Shop.
Yeah.
So at that point, I believe that it stopped being a gas station in 1987 or 88. And when I started working for Lake County, it was a bait shop. And so the old Sohio gas station structure was still there.
Mhm.
The old 2 bays and a little office set up with the pumps, but the pumps were removed a long time ago. I could call OEPA and find out when the pumps were removed. But the question is, do we rezone it to B3? Now, there are other uses in B3 besides gas station that they can do on the site.
Mhm. Okay, that answers my question though, thank you.
Okay, I don't know that I have any other questions. I know we have, the public's here. Does the public wish to speak on anything this evening?
This is just a zoning public hearing, so I believe if you're taking comments, opponents and proponents for the zoning change.
That's fine. Yeah, I'd like to hear from the public. Just approach the microphone and state your name for the record. Thank you. Mr. Horton, I'll get back to you, sir. I'm sorry.
My name is John Steenberg. I've lived in Fairport about 4.5 years, and on and off for probably the last 15. I reside right across the street from Barry's, and my personal belief is the first thing you see when you come into Fairport is this triangle. And I have personally no problem with them putting a gas station there. I just want to make sure that before we, sign up for this, that it's done appropriately with a lot of class. And there's a nice foundation at this end of town between the senior center,
Mhm.
Hidden Harbor, the houses,
Sure.
and everybody's worked really hard to kind of, give a nice little push to Fairport to get it over the hump. And, if this is a gas station like you see on Vine Street in Eastlake, it's gonna ruin the town. On the other hand, if they do it appropriately and pay a lot of attention to traffic patterns, slowing the traffic down through there a little bit, I'm happy. But I hate to sign up for changing the zoning without any indication of what we're signing up for.
Fair enough.
And I think that's getting the cart before the horse. Because, you know, once we okay the change in the zoning, you know, it's out, the cat's out of the bag, and we
Sure.
won't be able to stop it.
Okay, appreciate
right.
your comment.
I had a lot of little issues, but, you know, let's stay at the 30,000-foot view right now.
Okay, I think the little ones could probably be addressed at the planning commission, because that's where this will go next, correct, Dave?
If the property is rezoned, the property owner would be required to submit a site plan to the planning commission for review, and the public can comment on that. The Dollar General submitted a site plan and had to follow Fairport Harbor's architectural standards. This building will also need to follow Fairport Harbor's architectural standards. We worked long and hard to get a fairly nice-looking Dollar General. We will work hard to make sure that any gas station that comes in here, or any structure that's put on this property, if it remains C2 or becomes C3, also meets the Fairport Harbor design standards and also meets all the landscaping standards.
I'm just going back to Mr. Harrison's question, is we put the public hearing before the planning commission.
The property, when we send it back to the planning commission,
Right,
the planning commission will be asked, is it appropriate to rezone the property from C2 to C3, and they'll make a recommendation on that.
so then at that meeting, are we gonna have something
No.
before that body?
No, we will not have a site plan at that point. They won't create the site plan until they're ready to pull a zoning permit and ready to start creating the gas station. The planning commission will only make a recommendation if it should be rezoned and allow those uses on that property. If those uses are allowed, then the property owner will submit a site plan when he pulls a zoning permit, and that site plan will be placed in front of the planning commission for their approval.
But without speaking for the planning commission, because those folks aren't here, but I sit on the planning commission and was very involved in how we rewrote our ordinances. I would think without some type of a site plan or some type of a conversation, I'd be very much against moving forward to moving this back to a C3 for that reason. We didn't just accidentally put the gas stations in the areas in town that we wanted to, so.
We went through the same process with Dollar General. The property was zoned industrial before Dollar General came in. They requested that the property be rezoned as, I think, C2. And so when they submitted, they went through the same process. We did not have a site plan for Dollar General.
We had more than a passing conversation with Dollar General, though,
Okay.
because we had already had them through for another property. So we knew what we were getting when we were having that conversation, I guess is what I'm saying. So I understand the way the sausage gets made here. I guess what I'm saying is that if this comes before planning commission, I'm pretty sure it's gonna be dead on arrival without a conversation with the property owner on what they wanna do there.
But the zoning regulations don't allow for us to require a site plan as part of.
We may not require it, but we could certainly have the conversation with them.
We can have the conversation
We
with
can
them.
change our law.
Right, so,
Mayor,
yes, sir.
just as a add-on to Mr. Ridishi's comments, just like in Dollar General, anybody can look at the ordinances to see what landscape requirements and buffer signing, all of that stuff is required, and that's the way it worked with Dollar General.
Right.
And it would be probably another long process, just like it was for them, but they would still have to follow the same standards that are already in the books on the ordinances.
Okay,
Mayor,
yes, sir.
I think the one difference, and you highlighted, is that we went from industrial to commercial. So it didn't matter if it was Dollar General. We knew that we were preventing an industrial facility from going in that spot in favor of some commercial facility going there, Dollar General, fruit market, whatever it's gonna be, but it wouldn't be industrial, which is what our desire was. And so we've sort of accomplished the goal at that point by making it commercial, because it took it from one that was more negative to something more positive. It is not as clear cut here. This could be positive, just like the gentleman said, but it also could be negative depending upon who buys it and what actually goes there. And to not have a plan or an idea beforehand, I think if we're trying to plan the future of the village, you know, the future is not next year, it's in in many cases, 50 years, right? So what does the next 50 years look like when you come to that point? And so it seems reasonable that we should have some sort of a plan, or at least a conversation officially before us, before we would make a decision like this, and which is probably why you're saying, before it got to the planning commission, which you chair,
Right.
that it might not make it through. So I think we're just looking for a little bit more information, and maybe there's nothing wrong with a gas station. You can make them look like a 1920s gas station, which might be really cool right there. But Vine Street wouldn't be, to the gentleman's point.
But just to put the council at ease, there are design requirements in the code already that I have to enforce. Even if this doesn't get rezoned, it's still C2, and we can get a McDonald's or
We could.
a hamburger joint, and they would have to follow the same standards. And they don't have to go through the process of getting rezoned without, they would just go right to site plan review.
Correct. That doesn't mean that's the right answer, though. And so what this means is we have an opportunity, you know, everybody would like to have a crystal ball. I want to know what the lottery numbers are tomorrow, right? But,
Right.
you know, we try to get a crystal ball to everything we can in life, in business, and anything we can do. And even though we have rules, and even though you're here, that you're gonna make sure we enforce those rules, we might not have thought of everything that might actually happen there. So we now have an inkling of what might happen there, so that gives us an opportunity to rethink this a little bit, and I think that's sort of what we're doing. That's why we're having that's why we're having a public hearing, right? So that we can get everybody's opinion on it. And maybe everybody's opinion is, let's think about this a little bit and make sure something nice happens there. I think that's really what everybody wants. Doesn't matter if it's a gas station or a McDonald's or a garden center for that matter. It's taken the time to consider everything and make it the best that it could be, because you only get one shot at it. And so you have discussion around it. If we have to tweak our laws and our rules and how we approve it, that's what we do. We don't just count on, well, this is the way we do it, this is what we have in place. Well, you know, not everything's perfect, so maybe we put more polish on the laws to make it a little bit more perfect. So I think that's what you're asking, Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Horton, did you have something? Thanks, Dave.
I'm confused because I hear a bunch of numbers being thrown around. What exactly is the change that's being requested? From C2 to C3?
Yes,
From,
from C2 to C3.
Which allows gas station, which is not a bad thing, it's just, it allows gas station.
Right. Because when we changed the ordinances with our change of use table, we took the gas stations and put them in C2, or into a C3, not into the C2. It used to be allowed in C2.
so the only place in Fairport that's zone C3 is Steele's Plaza. That's the only C3 zoning in the village.
It
So
could
that's
be.
the only place you could put a gas station in the village?
I would say no, because you have a gas station, you have two garages now that aren't.
Conform.
Right, but those ones are there, and as long as they stay there, those ones stay. It looks like Dave has something. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, that is correct. If the only spot in Fairport Harbor that's zone C3 is Steele's Plaza, yes, that's the only spot legally. That's why they're asking for this property to be rezoned. If there's another location that they want to put a gas station and it makes sense for us to rezone to C3, then we will consider rezoning that property to C3. The main reason why I think we removed gas stations from C2 is that majority of downtown is zone C2, and we're not sure if that would be a permitted a good use in downtown. C3 is more of the strip center. When we rezoned it, we classified it as being a regional commercial to draw other people into the village to utilize those facilities. And any gas station that's currently in place right now, the one over at the convenience store, is the only one I can think of, that would be legal non-conforming. It's grandfathered. You can continue on. they wanted to expand the pumps, they would have to go and they can expand like by 10%, and then they would need to get a variance from the BZA to expand further than that.
I'd just like to comment, Mayor,
Mhm.
that Mr. Steenberg was right, the cart's before the horse. But I'd hate to have that be dead on arrival when it goes to the planning. Is there anything we can do before that, Mr. Lyons, passing something, or, I mean, I just hate to be, it could be a good thing. And if you're, I agree with what you're saying, it'd be dead on arrival, but we have to have some planning to be able to, before it goes to planning, that we'd have a site plan or something. I mean, I can't understand why we can't have something to see and just make a change. Again, Dollar General, we knew it was gonna be. I just don't, I think it's a good thing, and I don't wanna see it fail because it's gonna be dead on arrival at planning. And I agree with you, it should be, because we don't even know what it's gonna look like.
I guess I'm confused, like Vern, in terms of the numbers. So Steele's Plaza, including the point, is
Not
C,
including the,
not including the point.
Right.
just
Oh.
the parcel that Steele's Plaza is on.
Oh, and so Steele's Plaza would, a gas station would be allowed there now?
Correct.
Okay, okay. So, you could amend the zoning code and make it a conditional use for a gas station in the C3. And you could put additional standards for a gas station in the C3 in terms of architectural details.
The,
Or a
Cor-
gas station in C2.
I guess, but that would open it up to
Yeah.
anywhere. I mean, I'm just thinking of this area over here right now.
What if he folded that property into the Steels? Would it then go under C?
no,
C3?
it's still, it would still be C3, C2.
C2. Okay.
The, under the ordinances, I believe that there might be a catch-all that says any additional information that's needed for a proper decision needs to be submitted, and I could request the applicant to supply at least elevations of what he would propose, what this gas station would look like for planning commission to look at. And it's not something that, it's just something that the board would just, the committee, the council would just tell me to do, and I will inform the property owner to give me a elevation as part of the application that goes in front of planning commission.
You've been so informed.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Dave, what do you think about the idea of a conditional use permit?
That would
Instead
get,
of rezoning it to C3? I mean, make it C3, but within C3, make it so that you have to have a conditional use permit for a gas station with specific architectural details, because that's a standalone parcel, really, in the
the,
village.
currently, all the C districts have architectural standards. And so we will require them to give us a nice-looking building. So that's not necessary to make it into conditional use.
I like the idea, Mr. Lyons. I think a conditional use gives you some other controls that allow you to, again, you create a contract that way because it's a conditional use. And with respect to guidelines and all those things that we already have in place, architectural guidelines, those are subjective. What one person likes, the next might not, and that doesn't guarantee that we're gonna do a good job. So the approving board might think, that's a great-looking gas station, but all the people who live across the street and everybody who comes into the town might think exactly the opposite. So the best way to ensure that is to have some sort of, the ability to have some sort of back and forth, and a conditional use permit allows you to stipulate guidelines around that, which creates a contract of such, right? And gives the village more input, gives the residents more input, because they can show up to a meeting and say, hey, I don't agree with those stipulations you put on, what about adding these three? And before they can proceed, council or the planning commission then has to consider those items before they make their decision. And if they make the wrong decision, then you have an election that comes up.
You know, perhaps, maybe Dave and I could just talk about the merits of each of those things and how much protection the architectural details are, you know, and how much more conditional use would give in such a situation, and maybe report back at the time of the planning commission here. So,
Yeah.
That'd be fine by me.
Does that sound fair, Dave?
It sounds fair, but just for the record, a permitted use is allowed by right, and they can come in and pull a zoning permit and give me all the right information, and if it needs to go through a site plan, it gets approved by, the site plan gets approved by the planning commission. And then after the site plan's approved, I would issue the zoning permit. A conditional use permit is still a permitted use, but there's additional conditions that are placed onto it by the planning commission or board of zoning appeals, I'm not sure
It would
which.
be the planning
Plan-
commission.
Planning commission.
Right.
Yeah,
And those
plan-
additional conditions are what's important.
If they meet all those conditions, then it has to be approved.
Understood.
Yeah. Now, what's good about that is that you have those additional conditions. And it's a dead property right now, and we want
Mhm.
to see it become an active property and a nice property.
Sure.
And the other thing that can happen if you change the law that way and allow it to occur that way and have those additional conditions, you have more input from the public, you have more input from the governing bodies that are here that plan the future of the village. And then the other thing that can happen too is, you know, honestly, if I own that property, I'm gonna sell it, you know, and, you always can even enter into a contract with the potential buyer that says, hey, I'm not gonna buy it unless it gets approved, right? And they come to the various bodies, go through Dave, and start running that ball over the goal line. And then they have to go down that conditional use path. And then it allows it to develop a much better product than maybe just something that's permitted right off the shelf, let's say. We don't want an off-the-shelf option, I guess. That's where I'm at.
I just think we have time because he's not planning on selling it for a while. There's no rush in doing it in November. And like Mr. Lyons said, I'd like to see the two talk together.
Sure.
Could be a great thing for the village.
It could be.
Okay. Any other comments?
Mayor?
Yes, sir. Hold on a second. We have some, come on.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm David Williams. I live at 1249 High Street, directly across from Steele's Plaza. My wife, right there, owns the lot adjacent to the house to the south.
Okay.
Which we purchased at a later date after we went under contract for the house, but she wanted the lot, and I think the way we've built the house, maintained it over the years speaks for itself. Happy wife, happy life. I have some handouts that I'd like to give to you. Is it all right if I approach? So we
Just
don't-
give the Dave.
And these photographs here are of the Sunoco station owned by the person that wants to purchase this property. And from what I'm told, he owns 27 stations. And over the weekend, I took a ride and found quite a few of them. I don't know where all of them are located, but they all look very much like that. I was told by Barry, probably, I don't know, 10 days ago, that this was sold and it was going to be a Sunoco station. If you look, that's 3 pages. I don't really think that the NASCAR branding logo on a Sunoco canopy is what the Village of Fairport is looking for. I realize that a lot of you, for a lot of years, have been putting forth a great deal of effort to revitalize this community, make it attractive. I've certainly done my part with my home. When they made reference to the gas station back in the 1980s, I believe it was, Hidden Harbor Estates did not exist. I believe they started construction on that in the late 90s. I purchased the first property, I think 2000, the second property in 2001. And I'm currently working with an architect on developing a vacant parcel, which would be directly opposite. I included a site plan map. So as I open my front door, I'm not real anxious. If you just look at the vacant property with all the pine trees, some of those would be going away. My dream retirement vision wasn't of a NASCAR canopy in bright blue with red, yellow, and orange lettering on it. I'm not opposed to a gas station. Barry's a nice man. He certainly has a right to move on with his life, sell his property. But the way this was presented, it was just rush, rush, rush. I'm very surprised that there was no notice posted on that piece of property as to the rezone request. I've trying to get a hold of my attorney, Tony Aveni, but he's been out of town, and I'm not sure if he's back. I was trying to seek his counsel on this and get some advice by him. As far as what Mr. Bertone said, I just rode through the village for an hour prior to arriving here, and I'm not even sure the street. It's when you go down where the restaurant is, I think they just tore down that old facility. Probably back in the day, that was a gas station. And I said to my wife, you know, a gas station could be kind of cute here if they would go with a retro motif. Not every gas station has to look like that, but apparently he has 27 of them that do look like that. And I also agree with the gentleman that said, once you grant the C3, the horse is out of the barn. It's all bets are off. So as I said, I'm not opposed to this. I just think we need to slow the bus down a little bit, take a look. We're certainly entitled. The reason I included the tax information, there are only 10 homes. Hopefully there may be 11 in the near future. There's approximately 90 condominiums back there. I mean, we generate a tremendous amount of taxes. Probably the most expensive in Fairport as far as a per capita basis. I mean, I think we as a community, we're like a spin-off satellite community up here. There's about 90 condos, 10 homes, and we just want it to look nice. Have no problem with the future, with development. I would love to see him sell his property, move on. I understand his son's gonna be graduating from medical school. He obviously has plans. Just, you can't build a house without obtaining a building permit,
Sure.
and just slow it down a little. What's the hurry?
Okay.
A
Thank you
couple
for
of
your
months isn't gonna matter. You're welcome to keep those, and I'd
Sure.
appreciate
I
if you
appreciate it.
review them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Harrison?
Thank you, Mayor. A couple comments. I think this may be a reason why we usually have the planning commission meeting before the public hearing. We're talking about a lot of numbers and things that we didn't have a map or the details of what the C3 zoning is, which might have made it more clear to everybody. Secondly, a question for Mr. Radishi. Did you have a chance to look at the area requirements for this parcel for that use?
The area requirements for C2 and C3 require like a 30-foot or 40-foot setback from the road, or 20-foot setback from the road and a 40-foot for rear line setback. It's going to be really difficult to put a building on this lot.
Well,
They're
a
gonna-
lot of that parcel is taken up by right-of-way. There's a 10-foot additional right-of-way on High Street.
At the front, on the front of the property.
Correct.
So
And,
the site is really difficult to build on, and this probably would require a variance from the BZA in order to put a building onto the property.
That, to me, that's a negative to start with.
Well, regardless if it gets rezoned to C2, C3, or remains C2, it's a triangle-shaped property. It's going to be difficult to put anything onto that property.
Thank you.
Thank
Well,
you, Dave.
But, Mayor, if I could add to that.
Yes, sir.
It might not be difficult at all. If I buy that property and the owner that is selling that property is probably selling the C3
Right.
strip center as well, and then I put my controls to my gas station in one of those units, and I don't need a building, I just need pumps. And so we've got to consider that as well, is what would happen if this were the whole property. I don't know.
Correct.
Just want to add that.
That's fair. Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and adjourn the public hearing, and then we'll have a council meeting.